Venezuela's National Assembly backed a memorandum of understanding signed by the government and opposition sectors in Mexico. Public workers in Brazil began a general strike against the administrative reform pushed by Bolsonaro's government. The Taliban are ready to establish an Islamic government in Afghanistan. From the headquarters of teleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I am Ray Gomez. We begin with the news. The Memorandum of Understanding signed by the government and the opposition sectors of Venezuela as part of the dialogues initiated in Mexico was backed unanimously by the National Assembly. In an ordinary session, the legislative branch approved in unanimity an agreement supporting the conversation that seek to consolidate democracy, social stability, and pacific coexistence. The President of Parliament, Jorge Rodriguez, highlighted the efforts of multiple political sectors in the talk process. He seized the occasion to ask the international community to stop harassing and pressuring Venezuela.
All of us implicated parts acknowledge that we understand the need to lift the sanctions imposed on the Venezuelan state, restating as inalienable rights of the nation those of independence, freedom, sovereignty, immunity, territorial integrity, and national self-determination. All of us acknowledge this, so no one can be excluded. We will stay because God grants victory to those who persevere, and we vote for them to stay too. We vote so everyone feels included in this process of seeking a peace agreement. That is why, just as I must vote for the agreement proposal presented humbly, I want to propose to this plenary that the Memorandum of Understanding also be approved by the National Assembly of Venezuela, to the effect that the law be published even though we know it is not a law in the technical definition. Do not correct me on this, but it will be an act that comes from the sovereignty of the National Assembly of Venezuela. In consequence, this Memorandum of Understanding will be published in the official Gazette of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, if your representative determine it to be so.
The Cuban medical mission arrived in Haiti to alleviate the health collapse following the 7.2 earthquake that hit the country. Many of the doctors and nurses are deployed in remote areas to treat hundreds of patients arriving in trucks with exposed fractures and other injuries. With barely enough time to eat, the Cuban health specialists are even working in the open air. In hospitals, they help to improvise. Haiti already has more than 1,900 fatalities and more than 10,000 injured in the aftermath of the earthquake. The national hospital network is suffocated by poverty, corruption, and the pandemic.
Cuban collaboration in Haiti since 1998 will be one of the best-kept secrets in the world. August 14, 2021, an earthquake of 7.2 degrees again hit Asian lands. Once again, Cuba is present in Port-au-Prince with 253 doctors who quickly moved to the affected places, treated the wounded, and adapted at a hospital for emergency surgeries. The images hurt. It hurts to know that it will take time to return to normal, but the medical brigades from the island accompany the Asian people in coups, earthquakes, and epidemics, and other complex situations, and the current crisis will be no different.
Funeral companies in Martinique face an excess of services amid a rise in COVID-19 cases and fatalities. The Caribbean Overseas French Territory has recently closed borders to tourists and imposed a lockdown for nationals, as health authorities have registered 1,200 cases per 100,000 inhabitants.
Normally, one burial a day, already one team working a fair amount, and since COVID, we can say that we are practically running at 3 burials a day. Yesterday we had 5 burials, today we have 2, tomorrow we have 3. We are extremely sought after, and as most deaths occur in hospitals, we are called upon to relieve congestions in the funeral home and to come and collect the deceased.
According to Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern, New Zealanders must brace an additional COVID-19 cases from an outbreak that has plunged their country into a snap lockdown. The official also said they were dealing with a highly transmissible Delta variant linked to the outbreak in Australia that authorities have so far been unable to contain. The rapid rise justified the Prime Minister's decision to issue nationwide stay-at-home orders. The new infections ended a 6-month run without local transmission in New Zealand, which has recorded only 26 COVID-19 deaths in a population of 5 million since the beginning of the pandemic. The Vice President of the Brazilian Senate Commission that investigates the government's management of the COVID-19 crisis disclosed that evidence indicates that President Bolsonaro is responsible for falsifying a public document linked to the handling of the pandemic. Randolph Rodriguez, second in charge of the investigation commission, validated the suspicions of Bolsonaro based on his case of misinformation about COVID-19 on inexistent evidence. In an early stage of the sanitary crisis, the Brazilian head of state had said that the numbers of infections and deaths due to the COVID-19 were being overdimensioned by governors and mayors without any real proof to back up his accusations. The document Bolsonaro based his claims on turns out was redacted by Alexander Marques of the Court of Auditors, who in talks with the Commission disclosed that the document's information was tempered and flawed. The Commissioner of the High Chamber indicated that the President was wrong to use the document and not verified the validity of its content. We'll be right back after this very short break. Welcome back. The Brazilian Federation of Postmail and Telegraph Workers announced its decision to go on an indefinite strike opposing the privatization of the company. The state-backed sectors of the organization had already begun the halting of services on Tuesday. The Communications Secretary of the Federation, Emerson Marinho, informed that the national direction reaffirmed the strike schedule on August 18th at 0000 hours. Marinho pointed out that several assemblies will be held with the third and night shift. The protest, he informed, will go on for an undetermined period. The workers' demands involve improvements of the working conditions and payment, along with putting a stop to the companies ravaged by Jair Bolsonaro's project of giving it away to the private sector. At least 57.6% of Brazilians believe that President Jair Bolsonaro intends to stage a coup d'etat in the country, according to a recent poll. As revealed by the survey conducted by the Opinion Institute of Congress in Focus, 74.5% of respondents say they always prefer the democratic regime, while only 31.1% do not believe Bolsonaro will attempt an institutional rupture. The survey also asked respondents about the military parade of tanks a week ago in Brasilia. For 43% of the people, Bolsonaro tried to intimidate the Congress and the Federal Supreme Court with these events, and for 49.3%, it worsened public opinion on the president. Likewise, according to 61.3% of those interviewed, the right-wing military is to blame for the death of almost 600,000 Brazilians due to the COVID-19 epidemic. Jair Bolsonaro aspires to run for re-election next year, and his possible rival would be former President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, who, according to polls, is ahead of him in voting intentions. Human rights organizations in Colombia denounced the critical situation in which communities of the Diburdu reservation live. Irregular armed groups engaged in combat and caused displacement in Diburdu, an area of the Chocó department, since August 15th. There's been reports of forced recruitment of underage residents and of the confinement of 3 communities, Pizarro, Baudusito, and Unión San Juan, which has hampered families from going out to their jobs or looking for basic supplies. Due to this situation, human rights platforms and local organizations have called upon authorities such as the General Attorney, the police, and the international community to protect the population.
I am, alongside my Board of Executive, asking the government to stop the crossfire. I am demanding the fundamental rights we have as inhabitants of the sub-region of San Juan and the ending of the armed conflict, for it is us who are paying the high cost of war. For over 4 days today, our communities are in the middle of the war and the crossfire. We can't stand it anymore. Please end the war in these territories. We call upon the government and the armed actors present in these territories of the Colombian Pacific of the Chocó Department. Please end the war. To the entities that supposedly defend national and international human rights. Please, we need help in our territories. We cannot live in peace. We need the termination of the war, the armed conflict, so we can live a peaceful life. Make sure that the peace dialogues are followed through, that the points signed by the government and the FARC are carried out with healthy closure.
Asylum seekers from Central American countries continue to be deported from the United States to Mexico in conditions that violate their fundamental rights. The first of 6 flights landed at the international airport of Tapachula, Chiapas. It arrived from McAllen, Texas, where asylum seekers were transferred by bus to the border city of Talisman. Due to COVID-19 pandemic, overloaded planes are not allowed. Therefore, more flights from Texas with hundreds of asylum seekers will arrive in the coming days.
The child has not eaten since yesterday. He was supposed to receive food and nothing. We are treated like garbage. He has not eaten. We began to step down from the bus, and they're crossing the border. They just handed us over just like that. Here the migration authorities, well, the Guatemala police, nothing. We just got out in the border and just crossed the line just like that.
The representative of Guatemala, Mario Ernesto Galvez, considered that Mexico shouldn't get involved in the inhumane policies implemented by Biden's administration.
The government of Mexico should respond to these express deportations because we understand that they are being returned with consent from said government and that by doing so it is reinforcing a treaty signed by a previous administration, providing for humanitarian reasons and escort and a transport in more suitable conditions, at least up until the border with us here in Guatemala, seeking with this at all moments to protect the physical integrity of the travelers, especially the underage ones, who are part of deported families. It is not what you can expect from democratic and progressive governments like those in power in the United States and our brotherly neighbor, Mexico.
Workers of the education sector in Uruguay mobilized today to demand more budget freedom for their union and a democratic educational project. The Coordinating Committee of Education Unions of Uruguay called for a rally in the vicinities of the Legislative Palace with the support of different teachers' unions. They demand compensations for their loss of wages in 2020 due to the case of learning activities because of COVID-19. They also denounced that the resources allocated per child were 4% less than last year and condemned the privatization of education as a design of the current economic and social crisis caused by the pandemic. The teachers' unions assure that other mobilizations could take place in the coming days against governmental reforms to education for 2022 and 2023. We have more stories coming up after this financial break. Welcome back. Taliban spokesman Zabihullah Mujahid announced that the insurgents are ready to establish an Islamic government in Afghanistan after having taken control of the country. Mujahid also referred to the current situation, assuring that within the following days, security will improve, especially in the capital, Kabul. The Taliban declared the Islamic Emirate is committed to all of the countries and not being a threat to any state, but made clear that the Afghans have a right to adjust and dictate the rules and that foreign observators must respect that. The Taliban spokesman promised improvements in Afghan economy and in the life conditions of the population. He once again apologized to all affected, even to the previous government's army members and those who were with external forces. The spokesperson stated that they will need international help in order to stop being a production epicenter of opioids. Meanwhile, Amrullah Saleh, the first Afghan vice president who ranked below former President Ghani, proclaimed himself acting president of the country and joined Ahmad Shah Massoud in Panjshir. Shah Massoud announced he had launched an armed movement against the Taliban and called on all Afghans to work towards a military revolution to fight the insurgents. The country is now back into a civil war scenario between the Taliban and their supporters on the one hand, and the Pashiris plus people on the side of Amrullah Saleh on the other. Thousands of people in Kabul try to board an evacuation flight that several countries of the world carry out in an unorganized and inhumane way. Airport Hamid Karzai is flooded with high levels of tension due to the state of chaos and confusion. The nation's State Department reported that over 3,200 diplomats and foreign workers have been evacuated until Wednesday, a modest number if taken into account that last Sunday 88,000 people waited for a flight to leave the country. Italy managed to extract 85 Afghan collaborators. The Spanish aircraft wait in Dubai for authorization to fly into Kabul and transport both Spanish and Afghan personnel connected to the embassy. Germany, United Kingdom, and France also try to sort out the extraction of their citizens and local collaborators. But the mission is turning out in the officials' versions to be very difficult, despite the several foreign officers that have already confirmed having normal talks with the Taliban.
We are here, and the US and British soldiers stationed here say they have orders not to let anyone into the airport. That's what we have been told.
Al-Shabaab announced a takeover of a military base in the Somali central region of Galmudug. According to the armed group, the attack went on for several hours. They also reported that in the military operation against the Galmudug base, at least 3 soldiers died, as well as several officers, among them the Naval Forces Commander Hirzi Ali Jair. Ex-members of Somalia's intelligence services alerted that a situation similar to the one in Afghanistan could be triggered if the government keeps relying on the assistance of foreign troops for every action. The U.S. National Hurricane Center reported that Tropical Storm Grace is moving towards the Yucatan Peninsula, while Storm Henry is approaching to southern Bermudas. After leaving rains that could still cause floodings and landslides in Haiti and the Dominican Republic, Grace will continue to move away from Grand Cayman today. It is expected to make landfall in the Yucatan Peninsula Thursday morning and move over the southwest of the Gulf of Mexico early Friday. At the same time, Henry, a smaller storm in the Atlantic, is about 130 miles south of Bermuda, with maximum sustained winds of 50 kilometers per hour. Fred also weakens after making landfall in northern Florida on Monday and is now a tropical depression that threatens to bring rains and flooding. France's worst wildfire of the summer has been active for more than 3 days. In the event, 2 people have died and thousands of residents and tourists have fled. The blazes are spreading through the southeastern Riviera haven of Saint-Tropez in the Var department. The scorching has ravaged 5,000 hectares of forest and vineyards, resulting in the destruction of the wildfire that inhabited the lands. 1,200 firefighters were deployed with high-pressure houses, water bombing plants, and helicopters, yet the flames are still active. This is the latest addition to the wildfires that threaten the Mediterranean region, all through Turkey, Greece, Italy, Spain, and Algeria. And as firefighters continue to battle the massive Dixie Fire, other crews in Northern California in the United States are dealing with other growing wildfires. The Caldo Fire continued extreme growth for a second straight night in El Dorado County, with winds erupting the fire dangerously close to well-populated communities. At least 2 civilians were airlifted to hospitals with injuries described as severe and serious, both of them picked up in Grizzly Flats, according to a Forest Service official statement. On Wednesday, the American Red Cross in Northern California said 2 of the main shelters were at full capacity given the massive evacuations. Other 16,000 El Dorado residents were taken to shelter, and close to 15,000 are also evacuated across Plumas, Siskiyou, Lassen, Trinity, Tehama, and Shasta counties. We've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at teleSUR English. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For teleSUR English, I'm Harry Gomez. I thank you for watching.